I'm going to go through some numbers, and this may bore the tears out of you, so if it does, stop me. But I want to give you some talking points for how to talk to people about the military budget. First of all, let's get down to the language we use. Drop the term defense spending. There's nothing defensive about it. The Pentagon is not about national defense. Even the term military spending doesn't quite reflect what we want to get at. When you test these phrases with people, the one that they respond to most viscerally is Pentagon spending. They understand that the Pentagon is an unaccountable runaway bureaucracy that is not working for them. And so change your language. If you've been talking about military spending and defense spending, talk about Pentagon spending, even though we know there are elements in the military program of the country, like the nuclear budget, which are not in the Pentagon. We know that. It's in the Department of Energy. Homeland Security is not in the Pentagon. But in terms of communicating with people, this is a way of kind of connecting with them to something that they understand intuitively. We have 963 generals and admirals in the country right now, line officers in top command. Each of those carries with them a budget of about $1 million a year in their retinue and benefits. That's the largest ratio of top brass to soldiers, to grunts, in modern history. More than during the Second World War, more than the Korean War, more than the Vietnam War, and certainly more than the Iraq and Afghan wars. Today we're carrying a lot of people whose job it is, basically, is to keep the arms industry happy. That's what the Pentagon is all about. The Pentagon is simply a brokerage firm for the arms industry that allows them to broker their weapons for your money. We have to talk to people about national security in a different frame. National security is not about how big your military is, how many carriers you have, what missiles you have, which of the latest fighter planes you have, or how many people under arms. That's not about national security. National security is when people have a home, an income, decent retirement, the right to education. Those are the things that give people a sense of security. So we need to broaden the definition of national security and redefine the functions of security. If we put a fraction of the money we now squander on weapons we don't need, for enemies that no longer exist, for wars we cannot fight, if we put that into aggressive diplomacy, into economic and education aid, into health research and development to wipe out diseases that afflict developing countries that they cannot afford to treat or even research themselves. If we put money into those things, we would raise our security, our national security, immeasurably. And we would not have as many people eager to retaliate for things that we do to them. If we closed some of the 1,000 foreign bases around the world that we carry, over 200 bases in Germany. Now, explain to me which enemy we're defending against in Germany and how the German people cannot defend themselves. Explain that. Explain that, because the Germans are in NATO and they're in Afghanistan right now, fighting. They have a military. In England, in Spain, in France, we have military installations. If you looked at a map, and we have one actually, a picture of a map that shows the lines to all of the bases in the world. It's like a bunch of spaghetti. And most of those bases are in places where the people do not want them, where they are associated with regimes that repress them, like Colombia. We are now investing $400 billion in the F-35 fighter, the 21st century fighter. The F-35 was designed for the Cold War to fight the Russians, or at the time, the Soviets. Soviets don't exist. It's a weapon that doesn't work. They've just grounded all the F-35s because of flaws in their design. The F-22 is a plane that routinely kills its pilots because of malfunctions. And they put a new restriction that F-22s aren't allowed to fly more than 30 miles from their bases because of fear that they won't get back. We're paying for these things. This is simply to secure the bank accounts of the arms industry. That's the national security that it is designed to take care of. The profit margins of the arms makers. We spend 57% of our discretionary budget on the military. Now, what's a discretionary budget? There are two categories in our budgeting system. There's mandatory. Mandatory is things that are dictated by law, like Social Security. Discretionary spending is what Congress votes on and fights about every year. Okay, 57%, 57 cents out of every dollar that you give the government goes to the Pentagon. Since 2002, that budget, the Pentagon budget, has increased by 35%. All other domestic discretionary spending has gone up only 8%. So the military spending is advancing at a rate 4 times the rate of all other expenses to the budget. Jack said, one of the contributors to our current crisis is military spending, doing it on the credit card. If you add in the cost of the wars, it's 48%, 6 times the rate of increase of the domestic budget. We spend, in the world, for the entire world, we spend 42% of all military spending in the world. Almost half. Almost more than the rest of the world combined. We spend more than the next 14 countries in rank, and some of those, by the way, are our allies in NATO, but including China and Russia and any one of a number of the so-called rogue states that Bush used to talk about. In fact, if you put them all together, the so-called rogue states, 1% of the global total. We could cut our military budget in half, and we would still spend more than any other country. We spend 5 times as much as the second place, which is the Chinese. 5 times. We have 11 aircraft carrier groups, 11. There is no country in the world that has more than 2. Soviets have 1. Russians, have 1. Chinese have 2. Those carrier groups are not defending us against anything. Those carrier groups are what we call projecting force. Projecting U.S. force on other people. Which is to say, if you don't do what we tell you to do, or what's in our interest not being your interest, but the interest of investors, if you don't do what we say, you will have to deal with our 11 carrier groups. It's very plain. The message is out there. The Iranians get that message every single day.